All right. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope everyone is enjoying their weekend so far. It is Saturday out here in Northern California, about 1:45 p.m. Pacific time. Goodness, got a lot of earthquake activity ramping out here in the Philippines following that 7.6 earthquake. The latest one shows a 6.0. As always, there's potential large aftershock possibilities, including up to maybe even beyond the main magnitude, which was a 7.6. We'll continue to watch that because these guys are shaking like crazy. All right, so that's a rather large earthquake, right? And the third largest one of the year. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions here going on, coming in through email and comments and whatnot, even here in chat, about the relationship between earthquakes and space weather activity. Of course, as you know, we did see and experience a rather strong G3 class storm here. We had about G2 last night, and the previous night it got to about G3. KP index up around 7, as you can see right here on this chart that Kevin has. That's a pretty strong solar storm, and sure enough, a day or two later, we get a large earthquake. So I never for once here said that the space weather activity does not affect earthquake activity. A few months back, maybe a couple years back here, we looked at some data, and there was about a 50-50 toss-up. Not all the time did we see space weather uptick when we seen large earthquakes, but about 75% of the time when we see large space weather events, there is a relationship between the two, and we see larger earthquakes take place during the elevated KP index. But not once. I want to clarify that I did not once ever say that it's 100% not true or 100% true. It's a theory, right? And when you go and look at the data, which we're going to do right now, I pulled up, and there's a lot to look at. There's so many articles here. I've been reading this for the past couple hours in terms of scientific data, right? It's a theory, for one. When you think something in the science world, when you think, you try to explain something, right? The correlation and the relationship between space weather and earthquake activity. And there's huge articles all over the place from Harvard University to nature.com. And a lot of these folks can agree with that there is some relationship to the space weather activity and earthquakes here on this planet. If you really think about it, the Earth is protected by the magnetic field, right? And when that gets hammered, so to speak, from these large CMEs, it does provide, obviously, strain and stress amongst the atmosphere levels and also down here on the ground, the Earth, the crust. And that could, in turn, trigger earthquakes. That may be built up somewhere very high, right, far as the strain goes, and all it takes is a little bit of static or potential strain on that electromagnetic field to trigger that earthquake activity. Now, there's a lot of charts. Not going to go over these, but I am going to leave every single article here in the update video below. I do want to show you guys some relation here in terms of large events. Now, this is the top 50 geomagnetic storms with KP index up around 9. We did not see that over the past couple nights. Pretty strong storm. I think everyone remembers that. Back in October 29th, 2003. I think that's when we seen the one of the power grids go out up in Canada. I believe that's when that took place. But that's KP index of 9. That's a pretty strong solar storm happening at the end of October. And that's going to be right here. I pulled up the historical data. 2003, October 3rd, or October 30th, excuse me. And I looked at the data here. I actually went back a day or two before and a day or two after the arrival of that strong CME that hit back in 2003. Now, we did have a 7.0 roughly about that time. That strong CME impacted Earth, along with a 6.4 down in New Zealand about a day later. That's pretty convincing, right? seen large earthquake activity kicking up following a large solar storm. The other one I did was 2004, right around November time frame, and that was these are all some very strong solar storms. You can go check them out yourselves if you want. I just want to bring up a few of them. This one right here, KP index of a 9, back in 2004, November 10th, 2004, right? And that's this one right here, or right here. We had a 6.9. That came in. That came in roughly a day earlier, right? About a day earlier. In fact, these two earthquakes came in a day prior to the arrival of that CME that kicked up on this date, 11/10, where we're seeing a KP index of 9. So, but also if you look down here, that was a very active pattern. A couple days prior to that bigger one, we had some further storming going on right here and this one down below. So that was like a multi-day event, and the data here shows us that there was definitely some large earthquake activity. It looks like around the first one, the second stronger KP index there, I don't see any elevated larger earthquake activity around that time frame, but it does look like there was some increasing larger magnitudes there with the arrival of a couple of those CMEs that hit back in 2004. The other one that I was looking at is back in 2000, about mid-July or so. We've seen a couple 6s kicking up here around that time. And that's July 2000. Now, that was a pretty strong storm as well. We've seen, let's see if I can bring that up right here. KP index of 9. And that coincides with this data right here. Seen quite a few 6s stirring up around that time of the arrival of that large CME. 2001. Okay, 2001 here. Seen a 5.7. April, around the April 1st time period, 2001. That's going to be right here. I did a couple days prior to this date and a couple days afterwards. KP index of 9. Okay, so this one right here is not as strong as the other ones, right? So this is kind of why I lean, I shouldn't say I lean towards them not being related. I'm leaning more towards the relationship between the two, but it's not always that we see large earthquake activity during these periods of upticks in CMEs and space weather activity. I mean, obviously, KP index of 9 or so, that's a pretty strong event, right? And we did not see the large-scale earthquake activity that we've seen on the previous ones that I just showed you. It's very common to see a 5.7 on any number of days throughout the year. Now, whether you want to call this an uptick or not, this was over. Let's see here how many days I put this at. April 3rd to March 29th or so. I gave it a few days. But if you think about it, even in this sense of a few days, we can take any few days throughout the years and enter them in and see maybe a similar type output of earthquake activity. Does it look a little bit more elevated, during this arrival? Possibly. I mean, a 5.7 in the Mariana Islands is very common. 5.6 in Papua New Guinea happens almost daily. 5.5 here in Japan is very common as well. So this is just one of the lower models that I like to show in terms of potentially the lack of space weather conditions and earthquake activity. There's no large earthquake activity prior to the arrival of this large CME that hit us back in 2001, and that was KP index of 9. Now, there should have been, right? If you look at the past data where all these other charts I showed you showed large earthquakes happening. So I believe there is a good percentage of events that take place here, the CMEs, in relation to triggering earthquakes activity, large earthquake activity, whether it's on that given day or maybe a day or two following it. But it's not 100% is what I'm saying, and I've said that in the past. It's not always that we see large earthquake activity take place during, before, or after, a couple day period following a large CME. And for one to put in a time frame of 2 months or a month, even a month after the CME arrival, that can discredit the whole theory, because that's too long of a time. Anything can happen in a month's time that could be related to anything. Plate stress, volcano activity, anything. But we're specifically looking at the relation with CMEs impacting the Earth's magnetic field at a high level of intensity. And right now it rings about 75% favoring the relationship between them two, between those two. So there's, let's see, where's my article at here? Is it this one? This one here is the one I was using. This you can check out any single year, any single date, and the KP index is over here off to the side, this level right here. But I went ahead and just pulled up a little bit easier view for everyone to see here, and it puts the KP index max over here in that observed time frame during that day. And you're welcome to check this out yourself. I checked out quite a few. I pulled up the ones that are the strongest, right? The strongest KP index of 9. 3 of these coincided with large earthquakes during that arrival of some large CMEs. One of them did not. That puts it at about a 75% chance that these are related in terms of space weather. But I believe that there is a relationship between the two, because you got that massive amount of solar activity, plasma, and charged particles slamming into the magnetosphere of this planet, and obviously it's going to create stress and strain at the plate tectonic level. And that it could, if there's enough strain built up somewhere, I see that electronic or electrical impulse there that the magnetic field receives, potentially triggering some earthquakes here at the ground level. But I can't say 100% certain because I don't see it. That's what I'm trying to state, and that's what I said before. I'm getting a lot of people chiming in. You're wrong. It's always happening. It's always going to happen after a solar storm. You can't say that. That's like it's gonna rain when it's cloudy. It's going to rain all the time when it's cloudy. Not really. There's not enough precipitation up there to form moisture droplets to hit the ground. So that's my thought on it. A lot of people, other YouTubers and whatnot, state that it's 100% facts. But I look at science and put the facts in, and the data. The data does not lie, right? When you look at past historical data, yes, there's a strong relationship between the two, but it's not set in stone. It's not 100%. And that's what we see here with this article, with this time frame here. Many different articles here. This one's from Harvard, the influence of solar cycles on earthquakes. That's just one. I have, goodness, there's just so many on here. This one goes into detail and tests the theories out in terms of the potential of aftershocks. They eliminate the aftershock potential from a main quake, compare large earthquakes like a M8.0 to proton density that the Earth receives from a CME. And this is one of the more thorough articles, and this is probably way above my level of education. This is a very well thought out process, and they tested a lot of theories and whatnot when it comes to the earthquake and solar wind, the CME activity that we receive here on this planet. So this paper, and I want you guys to read this. If you want to know about it, I want you guys to read this. It's lengthy, but it's from nature.com. This paper gives the first strongly statistically significant evidence for a high correlation between large worldwide earthquakes and the proton density near the magnetosphere due to the solar wind. This result is extremely important for seismological research and for possible future implications on earthquake forecasting. But like I say, these guys are trying to study it. There's a lot of YouTubers trying to study it. I've had it kind of on the back burner a little bit, but we do like to look at relationships between the sun and what goes on here on the Earth, because it can affect weather to an extent. Also, obviously, earthquake activity. But I'm still keeping track here on my end, a little chart that I'm building off on the side on a different computer in relationship since my monitoring has began of space weather and earthquake activity. And I want to go over it maybe in a year or two and see how it compares. But, this is kind of a theory right now on if these things do trigger earthquakes, these large CMEs. In this paper, they demonstrate that it can likely be due to the effect of solar wind modulating the proton density and hence the electrical potential between the ionosphere and the Earth. It's the ionosphere there that affects potential plate adjustment here at the surface. We believe that a possible, likely physical mechanism explaining our statistical observations is the stress-strain pulse caused by reverse piezoelectric effects. Such pulses would be generated by large electrical discharges channeled into large faults due to their highly conductive conductivity because of fractured and water saturated fault gauge. So this is a big article. I want you guys to read it. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it leans towards the potential and the relationship between the two. And they go in little tests to eliminate, maybe on this day, when we had a large earthquake, the CME missed us or just barely glanced us. Like if you go back to 2000, when it was a big earthquake in Hawaii, in Japan, wasn't that March 11th, 2011, I think? Let me double check that and see when that was. I believe it was March 11th, but I want to make sure. 2011. So let's just bring this down. And we'll put this up here at 2021 just to get it going. So largest, that was March 10th. Very close though to the March 11 time frame, 2011. Okay, so I want you guys to look at that. That's one of the biggest earthquakes that I have seen. Obviously, there's been a couple bigger, but the largest one down there in the Chile area. So that date, 2011, March 10th, 2011. Now I want to go over here and show you guys this page here. This has got all the KP indexes and whatnot throughout the years, throughout the days. It covers every single day. Just got to go find it. So March 11th, that's a little bit too far. Okay, let's go up here. March 11th. And we're going to go back a couple days and look and see what has kicked up. Okay, so we're going back to March 3rd, March 7th, 2011. This is a KP index right here on this chart. Notice these are only ones, twos. There's a little bit of threes. Threes are always common, right? There's no major event. There was a 4 back on the 10th, so that was one day. But when you go down here to the March 11th time period, right, when that earthquake struck, we actually had G1 class storming conditions there. And it also looks like a little bit following that KP index of around 5 or so. A couple, like a day before it, KP index around 4. So, that's kind of in a relation as well with that 9.0 that struck back then. We had a little bit of solar storming kicking up on this planet. But is it 100%? No, not 100%. Is it leaning towards it? Obviously, yes, it is. The data shows us that. So I wanted to clarify it. I wanted to put a little bit of information out there for you guys to chime up on, because it's, if I'm going to say something, and when I say 100%, I want it to be facts. I want the facts to prove to me and everyone else that that is it. There's no other possibility or any lower percentage that those two are not related. The data is there. It's about 75%. I'm leaning towards 75% that there is a relationship between those two. And I think we'll cover this a little bit more. It is an interesting topic in terms of the relationship between them two. We got out here across the Cascadia, 3.4. Well, that's on the Gorda plate here. Don't want that thing going off. Southern California has dropped off tremendously, though, following this activity over here in the Philippines. But it looks like the northern section here wants to move across the Pacific plate. So we'll continue to watch that. There's always that likelihood of maybe seeing a larger aftershock out here. So just be prepared. I have quite a bit of seismograph stations there around the area that are monitoring the activity. There's a Philippine station picking up on what looks like consistent earthquake activity. But when a big one comes in, you'll see this thing get flatlined and potentially show up at nearby stations. But let me I want to hear your thoughts, folks, on what you believe. I know there's other YouTube channels, and I'm not going to mention their names, that cover it and say that it's 100% certain that earthquake activity is going to ramp up in a big way following a large CME event. The key word, 100%. Not all the times. And I showed you that on that map from 2001. I'm not going to go back there, but I'm going to let you guys do a little bit of searching around if you want, and kind of compare certain years maybe. It's something fun to do, and I like looking at some new data for sure. But for now, I think I'll go with 75% agreement that there's a relationship between the two, and that they trigger large earthquakes. Read this article, folks. It's definitely it's a good one. Definitely a good one. It's going to be the one from nature.com. This is the one it's got some big words in it and a lot of mathematical calculations and stuff that it just gives me a headache. But it's all self-explanatory here, and they go into their variables and make charts out of it. It's pretty cool, pretty lengthy. But it's worth the read if you got, I don't know how long it's going to take, but if you got a little bit of time, read it, and let me hear your thoughts in the comments. So we'll catch you guys back here a little bit later on.